Now that we've successfully imported our media from Avid to Pro Tools, it's time to start sifting through the material in these tracks and breaking out these clips to their appropriate stems. In this movie, we'll import our template that contains our stem routing and start sorting and organizing our clips, keeping only what's useful. Import session data under the File menu is a very handy way to get tracks from one Pro Tools session into another. We'll use it here to bring all of our pre-named and routed tracks from the Pro Tools template we made into our Castles movie session. Navigate to the my.template.post Pro Tools session file and click Open. When you open the template, you may get a notice that the session times don't match. That's nothing to be alarmed about since the template has no media. Just click through this window. You'll notice it looks a lot like the dialog window we used to import the OMF. In fact, it is the same dialog window. We're going to want to bring all of these tracks into our session here, so let's shift-click and highlight all the tracks below. Select All for track data to import, and click OK to bring them all in. Now you'll notice after the movie and reference file, you have all those empty tracks we made from our template. We have one housekeeping thing to do here. We want to do something called solo safe on the auxiliary stem tracks we created. This way, when we solo our tracks to listen, they'll still be heard through their respective stem outputs. To solo safe these tracks, just Command-click on the S solo button on all three of the stem tracks. The little S will become grayed out and they'll be solo safed. The next steps are where we really start getting our hands dirty. We're going to start going through all the clips from the original OMF tracks and moving them down into the appropriate dialogue, effects, or music tracks. You'll be required to listen closely and make some quality judgments about the audio. Most of this material is going to end up in the dialogue sync track since there hasn't been a bunch of effects or music added yet to the movie. But within the dialogue sync tracks, you're going to have to come up with a strategy to keep things organized. The first rule of thumb, if there's nothing in a clip or it sounds like garbage, we can ignore it. The first two clips on tracks 1 and 2 look and sound like they have nothing on them. Let's play them and see. Yes, our intuition is correct, so there's nothing on these clips. So we can select both of them and type Command-M to mute them. In addition to muting the clips, this technique also grays them out so we know they have already been addressed and we can move on. Next, we have 6 clips on the tracks below. One of them's a voiceover, the female reporter voice.
Sensation no more. Once award-winning architect fails to deliver on his downtown music hall.
And the other is the Mr. Dalton character talking off-screen.
Joseph is our most gifted architect. He takes risks. We all know it.
When we examine these tracks further by zooming in on them, we'll notice that the clips are actually the same thing duplicated on 2 tracks. See how their waveforms are identical? Having duplicated clips not only makes things louder, it also makes things more confusing, and we have more to deal with. So in this case, we'll mute the bottom clips and ignore them. A very crucial key command here to know is the Control button. When you hold the Control button down and then click and drag a clip from track to track, it keeps its position in time. Without doing this, you're in danger of sliding clips out of sync as you move them from track to track. So we'll Control drag each of these clips onto the dialogue stem tracks. Let's just decide right now that dialogue tracks 11 and 12 will be used for voiceover and any off-screen or replace dialogue. So I'll drag them onto those respective tracks. Now you can see you have a lot of work in front of you. Each clip has to be gone through meticulously and categorized and placed on a track that makes sense for its sound. For example, in the first few bottom clips here, when we solo them, we hear a distant, not very usable room mic.
Did you finish it? You know, I'm taking a big risk putting you on this Columbia project. The firm could be on the line here. 6 p.m. tonight. Simple deadline. Beat it.
We could probably get away with ignoring these clips, so we'll highlight them and mute them, at least for now. Also in this scene, you'll notice that some dialogue actually does have 2 mic sources, maybe a lavalier and a boom mic perhaps. Take for example the first line, when he says, "Did you finish it?"
Did you finish it? Did you finish it?
Zooming in on these waveforms shows us that there's 2 different mic sources. You can see they're different sources by the waveforms being different. We can also solo them, and we hear that they sound very different.
Did you finish it? Did you finish it?
We'll address those kinds of issues more when we get into our dialogue editing stages, but for now, our task is to break them out onto the dialogue tracks and keep them consistent from clip to clip. So now when we hear this clip and the very next clip,
You know, I'm taking a big risk putting you on this Columbia project. Did you finish it? Putting you on this Columbia project.
we can tell they're both from the same source, so we'll pull them onto the same tracks. We'll control drag them to tracks 1 and 2. The other character has a similar thing going on. Listen to the line, "That's 6 p.m., huh?"
That's it. 6 p.m., huh? That's it. 6 p.m., huh?
So we'll pull his 2 tracks to dialogue 3 and 4. It's going to sound choppy here for a little while, but the point is to be consistent and put like sounds on the same track. Later, we'll be able to make it more smooth. One thing you have to overcome is that the tracks may have gotten out of order during the video edit. The lavalier might be on top in one shot and the boom on the bottom, and vice versa on the next shot. This is something we need to use our listening skills to overcome. The first part of this scene, after some listening and moving clips around, ended up like this. As you can see, there are a lot of muted clips that didn't get used from the original OMF, and the best sounding sources have been placed on the appropriate dialogue tracks below. Let's listen.
You know, I'm taking a big risk putting you on this Columbia project. Firm could be on the line here. 6 p.m. tonight. Simple deadline. Meet it.
That's it. 6 p.m., huh? And if I'm a risky choice, then don't use me. We all know what risky decisions lead to. The company's in free fall, and you want to take risk again. It's a creative approach.
Now, this is far from perfect sounding, but it's a good start and much more easy to deal with than the mess we had going on the original OMF tracks. Obviously, as you work through the session, you can't have a track for every character. So the convention is that you use the top 1 to 5 or 6 tracks for the first scene, then the next 6 through 10 or 11 tracks for the next scene, and then back to the first 5 or 6 tracks for the following scene. This is what's referred to as checkerboarding. So now we have some work to do. The end version of this session will show you an example of how our timeline might look when we are done with this stage of editing.